Hello. Good evening, everybody. Good evening to those here in the audience, physically in the Orange Tribune, as well as those that are watching us via our YouTube channel. I'm very happy to get started finally again with a new series of BK Talks this semester. This is the first of the BK Talks this semester, and I'm happy to just give you a walk around of what is it that's going to happen during the spring. Because of all the holidays that we have luckily in the Netherlands on Thursdays in this semester, so we have less BK Talks, and that is somehow convenient anyway. Today we will be talking about soil, and I will give the word to the speakers in a moment. Then on April 20th we are organizing another BK Talks, which is called A Finite Planet, Degrowth by Design. On May 11th we celebrate copyright, about reproducing, replicating, emulating design in order to evolve. And finally, on June 15th, we celebrate the last of the BK Talk series, live from Venice. We are very happy to be able to travel to Venice and organize the BK Talks from there, in parallel with the exhibition that we are organizing about the contribution from the TU Delft for the faculty to work on the African continent, at large. We will explain better when the exhibition starts. Let's go to the conversation today, and then I will give the word to our guests today. We are talking about soil. I don't know so much about soil. I'm an architecture teacher, and then the curator of public programs. But I would like to show you something that we did with our students 1 year ago, 1 semester ago. It was a studio that had to do with the body. So as funny as it may seem, before talking about the body and relationship between body and what you put on your body, we decided to do this section. And we decided to look at the crust. We decided to understand the soil and the relationship between soil, nature, human bodies, our planet, and then finally go back to the very small scale of the human body. So our architecture students tried to understand what soil was, what the crust was, what it entails, what it implies, and they produced this series of beautiful drawings, which I think that were inspired actually in Alexander von Humboldt's atlases of his travels to Latin America. Anyway, our students were asked, and we asked them that before studying our bodies and our garments, we should know what the natural cycles were. And they tried to understand them. We wanted to represent the way cities are growing, and our, let's say, situation today, which is about a strong human impact on the soil, on the crust, and on the atmosphere, and the urgencies that it is producing. No? So I found really an interesting exercise, what we did with the students, because in the end, they ended up associating what we do to the crust, what we do to the soil and to the atmosphere, and they find all those links and relationships with all sorts of urgencies, current urgencies, and then they tried to describe, always working with that section of the soil. They finally found a way to describe a huge amount of urgencies that we somehow must face. So I always found this very interesting exercise of how we would end up talking about fertility and increasing longevity with a section of the soil, and all these relationships that they ended up finding. In the end, of course, we talked about global warming before, as I said, talking about our own human bodies. We produced this little movie. This is exactly what I was just describing, and then they put on this abstraction of what the planet is, all the relationships, what humans do, how do we affect the planet, impact the soil, and the relationship that has with many planetary urgencies, not only global warming. So it's funny because I had prepared this little presentation before giving the word to our guests. But yesterday something very interesting happened, and I guess that you all are aware. I hope that you are aware. Yesterday the state elections in the Netherlands had an interesting outcome, to say the least. This BBB party, which is a party that in a way is talking about soil, we can say, won the election. It's a landslide for the Netherlands. And I was really interested last night and this morning about who they are and where do they come from. So in the end, end, they are defending certain ideas, and they are defending also themselves, etc., etc. Food for discussions. But I also wanted to try to understand that besides defending their what they do, I try to understand also what they advocate for, no? And then this is when all sorts of relationships start to being found, no? So we start talking about farmers, we start talking about nitrogen, with about nitrogen, let's say, production decrease, but then we keep reading, and then we start looking at, talking about anti-Europeans, anti-immigrants, and in favor of banning burqas for Muslims, no? Who would have told us that the soil ends up with this kind of relationship? So you keep reading, no? And then you say that the movement fits nearly into a populist frame that portrays climate action as a new form of tyranny by governments and global elites over ordinary, hardworking citizens whose legitimate concerns are largely being ignored. So I think this is a really interesting, I would say, conclusion to what I had actually prepared with the work of my students. No, we started talking about soil, finding all sorts of planetary urgencies, and then yesterday some event tells us that everything is interrelated. Anyway, I will give the word immediately to Franche. I want to thank Franche very much for having organized this panel today. I also want to thank, and she will properly introduce our guests, Jose, Martina, Ferne, Michael, Mark, and Debra. Thanks for joining us here tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to give the clicker to Franche so that you please get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Yves. Okay, I hope I can manage, because now I have too many things in my hands, because I also have like proper talk host cards. Thank you so much for this super introduction. I'm very happy to have all these people here, because I think we have found a very super nice selection of panelists to be really walking around the topic. And for me, the topic started. I'm here an associate professor in the urbanism department and environmental technology and design section. And I did my PhD here about the relationship between water management and urban design in the Netherlands. And I looked into, in a historical perspective, to really understand also, well, how we came to where we are today. And, well, there were, of course, many important conclusions of my PhD, as always. But there are two things that I'd like to highlight. First is that the Netherlands has always been a very bad territory, in the sense that the Romans already left us here because they felt it's a territorium inferior. So bad food, wet, shitty weather. So yeah, they left the country, and yeah, in that sense, it is harsh. And there are some nice publications also talking about how Dutch people persevere here and stayed here to make it livable and, well, wealthy. One of the things is that in the 16th century, when the cities were expanding, they had to expand the cities into the swamp. So they also call the Netherlands thick water. So soil and water is very connected. So in that sense, in the Netherlands, you cannot talk about soil and not talk about water, and the other way around. And in expanding the cities, they really had to make a vision. So can you imagine 16th century people envisioning already their future? So that's really the phenomena that we, that we arrived here, and we'll be talking about this more later. After I finished my PhD, my first project was design with the subsurface. So my orientation has always been a bit broader than, say, only soil, but the subsurface in also, and now I'm going to move to this section, where you can, of course, see that Mother Earth we use in the Netherlands for many other functions, and that in that sense, all these functions really basically driven out this importance of soil and the fertility, etc. So what you see now is that, well, I basically put here the problems that we now encounter, that we will also talk about today, I think. So the nitrates is already quite well illustrated by Javier. But yeah, we're suffering from flooding and droughts because, yeah, the system is unnatural. In that sense, I have the statement I would like to put to Deborah later, that the Dutch have no idea what nature is, no clue whatsoever. That we, yeah, in that sense, our system is so controlled that we cannot, well, adapt to the changing hydrological system. Well, the carbon dioxide is also about the subsidence, which puts this out, which now are really also basically sort of squeezing the possibilities to become sustainable as a country. So besides my own fascination and the fact that I would like to organize something around, there are two main reasons to organize this evening. And one is that besides the political actuality, also the Dutch government finally decided that soil and water should be leading in spatial development. So this is still a sort of simple letter. Yeah, this is of course quite important and interesting, especially for the world of spatial design. So that's why we thought it's good to really talk about this. And we'd like to, on the other side, another initiative for this was the OASE, so the Journal for Architecture, coming from our faculty, the OASE 110, which is about soil. And I'm the treasurer of the OASE, so I also would like to, of course, put it forth. And I think that if you look at OASE for students in TU Delft, I think you can get a digital copy for free. It's really also the perspective of the designer. So what is the design perspective on this with soil? So those are the two things that we're going to be talking about with these panelists. And I asked them to introduce themselves. There's something actually, forgetting my other slides that I wanted to show you. So this is the soil and water in the news, that it is really a paradigm change. In Dutch it's called trendbreuk. Doesn't sound as good as paradigm change. That we're really trying to change something, so that's important, and they need the help of the designers as much as they can get, I believe. But on the other side, it's not about the designers, it's also about the other specialists in the city that we need, because this is the soil map of the city of Rotterdam. And you can see that according to a soil scientist, the city has no soil. So this is, of course, a big problem. If you want to design with soil and the specialist gave up on soil, basically. So we also need to get them back into the system, and we need to map, and I know that there are some projects going on at the moment, to bring the consciousness back. And I really love this painting of Madeleine Friesendorp for Delirious New York, where you can really see, it's very Freudian. It's about consciousness, and for us, a lot of things are so natural and self-evident that we forgot about them. And I always say that for designers, sometimes the soil is like the back of their paper, and they don't draw proper sections. Well, my students, they draw proper sections because I make them draw roots and water tables and foundations and everything, because, well, the point is, if you don't draw it, then it's also very difficult to take it into your design process. So this is, I think I love the work that Javier also showed with those beautiful sections. So I'm going to, see, I'm juggling here, go to the first round, where we're going to talk about our panels and their fascination. So our first panelist is Deborah, and she's an artist, primarily, but she's also a scientist at the University of Amsterdam, and a founder of Urbanizing, and she coined the term of multi-species urbanism. So she is very active and also practically building these things in Amsterdam. She's also a partner in a project that we have about water, energy, food nexus in excavation landscapes. So we have a collaboration, so that's super nice. So you picked this slide, this image. So can you tell us about your fascination for soil?
Thank you, Fransje. These are some chromatograms. And does anyone here know what a chromatogram is? Chromatograms are images of soil solutions spreading out over a special kind of paper. And what they show, these are images that are showing the interaction between soil life and different soil materials. So if we go look at the top one, actually let's not, look at the bottom. I'm really bad at right and left because I went to Montessori school.
It's right.
Okay, it's right. It's, okay. It's,
That one?
no, this
Oh,
one.
that one.
Okay, it's, yeah, that one. Sorry. Okay, this is a soil that's undisturbed. And what you see in this image, you see, in all of these images, what you see is that soil has been taken up through that center hole, through a filter, and it spreads out over the paper. And what is going on in this solution is the heavy things stay, of course, near the center. So you see the mineral parts of all the different soil samples there. And the heavy part, this gray part, it doesn't matter that it's gray, but it's gray, gray, purple, whatever, is the mineral part. And then this brown part going out to the edges, these are the lighter materials, the organic materials. And these vertical, these striae, going back to the center, these are the proteins. These are the proof that there was life in this soil that was interacting with these different materials, the organic layer and the mineral layer. So if there are a lot of these striae, you can see that there's been a lot of soil life and interaction. And in this one below, it's a natural soil. I was thinking of your slides. Maybe the better term is terroir. There's no terroir in the city. This is an urban soil. All of them are urban soils, by the way, in Amsterdam North, but it was of a pocket woodland. So it was left to its own devices, undisturbed for 25 years or so. And the soil organisms are interacting with the different materials. The one right above it, that very beautiful one, is a soil that I, together with Urbania Huve and the multi-species whole, made together. This is a very young human multi-species made soil. You can see there's a huge amount of organic material and an enormous amount of soil life, but it's a young soil because the mineral and organic materials aren't integrated. Anyway, I don't know how much time I have for each.
I think you gave an excellent introduction to
Okay.
the topic of our main character of this evening. So we'll talk about it more later. The second panelist is Mark Nieste. Mark Nieste is a landscape architect, and he's working for Deltares, which is our Delta Institute. So it's a large research institute catering to the government, but also to international governments. So you chose this image.
A completely different scale level.
Exactly. We're zooming out a little.
From Amsterdam north to the galaxy. Now you asked me about my fascination. My fascination is more about water than about soil. I have to be honest about that. But I like very much visualizations that make me see something new, something that I didn't see before. And I always looked at our planet and my own personal environment as the image on the left, as the Earth, as the blue sphere. And that's why the image on the right, it's by the US Geological Service. I think it was made like 5 years ago or so. It gave me a completely new perception and understanding of water in our environment. And if you look on the big blue sphere on top of North America, that's all the water that there is in and on top of Earth. If you collect everything, if you put everything together, that's about it. And if you look a little bit to the right, on the bottom, you see a smaller bottle, a smaller sphere. And that's all the liquid fresh water that we have on Earth. And if you really look good, then you look a little bit at 6 o'clock below that one, you see a very small sphere, blue one, and that's all the water collected on Earth, the fresh water in rivers and in lakes. And to me, this was a very sort of eye-opening image, and for me it also was quite an inspiration. and it gave me a new understanding about, okay, how I see my environment as a blue world, but that water is a very precious commodity, and it's not something that we have unlimited and that we can spoil and exhaust as a commodity. So if you ask me about a inspirational image, this was something that was very inspirational for me because it gave me like a completely new idea and a new perspective on especially water.
And I think that Deborah sees a lot of soil in that image, right? Yeah, it's like
yeah. I would wonder very much if you do the same exercise about soil that we use. Well, then you probably get an even very much smaller sphere.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe somebody can do that exercise somewhere.
Yeah, let's do that.
But, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to José Chung. And José is a citizen, but also a bit of a politician from the municipality of Midden-Delfland, just right behind Delft. And I voted for her yesterday because she was on the party list for GroenLinks, so I'm very open about my preferences. And they won, so it's a good day for the province of South Holland. And let's see, you chose this image. Oh yeah, what is your... my fault. I asked you about your fascination with soil, and you were talking about you asked me to find an image with the morphology.
Yeah, I think the morphology is very important to keep the Midden-Delfland alive, because it is a very important part between Rotterdam, Delft, The Hague. It's a meadow, you say that, meadow? A meadow, green, open, and it's very important to keep it like that. But if we do not use it in the right way, it will be soon built full with houses and greenhouses and roads and everything. So then it's lost, and it's very important to keep it. But you can only use the country if you know what is below. You have to use the right things. So,
yes, yeah, excellent, yeah. So this is sort of the new master plan for the municipality of Midden-Delfland. Thanks, José. Now we go to Martina Barceloni-Korte. And Martina is an architect, professor in landscape urbanism and a director of the Unité de Recherche d'Architecture at University of Liège. My French is terrible. And her field of expertise focuses on the design of cities and territories in the face of environmental constraints and risks. So your slide. You had 2 slides actually, they're both here. So yeah.
3 actually. So you asked me about fascination, and I decided at the end to put 2 slides, actually 3, of a photographer. So this is Guido Guidi looking at Veneto region in 1980s. And I like this, this sort of new point of view on a space that has been sort of considered banal. It's a vast agricultural plain that has been urbanized very rapidly in time. And I like this point of view because it sort of takes us towards a new gaze that we need to give on these kind of spaces. So soil, as you can see, has been urbanized rapidly, and agricultural land urbanized rapidly, and now is fragmented, diverse, sort of banalized in a way, but at the same time very rich and very diverse. So these pictures, and there is another one just after it, of a Swiss landscape. This is another photographer, it's Nicolas Faure. And I like the fact that they shift a little bit the point of view on a sort of classical image to suggest that there is something different that we can sort of look at, and that we need to change our gaze on these kind of surfaces that we considered sort of not interesting. And today, these urban soils, on the contrary, can really make the difference, even if they seem small, fragmented, paved, not interesting, but actually they could really contain the trigger for a very interesting and ambitious territorial project. And there is a last one at the end, just as a gaze, just how we need to change our gaze on apparently banal spaces that can be seen differently.
But this is a very good teaser for what we'll be talking about in a bit. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. The fifth panelist is Verne Echo, and she's a student in the studio in architecture here at TU Delft, in the urban architecture student, with the topic of Black Hills City, which is located in Belgium, in Liège, where Martina is working. And it is about a post-carbon landscape. So you chose this image, so yes. Why?
Okay, so my fascination with soil, my interest in this topic actually started last September when I started the graduation studio, urban architecture. I dedicated one slide to this studio too. It will appear any moment tonight too. But with this studio, we started the research on Liège, on the wider urban scale first, and I did this with a group research where we divided the landscape into sealed and unsealed landscapes, as we just saw across. And this perspective I brought along further in my research, which I'm currently in the middle of now. And
so we'll be talking about this a bit more later. So what is really your fascination? So keep it more personal.
My personal fascination now is this link between the soil, part of the material landscape, and then the more cultural, religious, social landscape. I can explain this maybe further in detail in the location of Liège later or now.
Yes, no, we'll do it later. But this is the teaser, so we're warming them up for later. Because I also expect loads of questions, because we are filling 90 minutes here, so I need your help anyway. Thank you for now. So then we go to Michael Hirschbichler. He's an architect and an artist, and has his atelier in Zurich, I presume. But he also works here as a postdoc in a project, which is, I did not put the title in here actually. What was the title?
It's called Stained and Storied.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I forgot to put it here. And it's a shared postdoc also with 2 other universities. So you're really connecting Europe in that sense, and also being here. So your slide, I can see that I'm helped. Yeah, this was your slide, showing your fascination.
Yeah. So I basically build upon what you just said. For me, soil primarily is a cultural resource. And so it's made, or maybe more generally, ground and soil is something that is made up of matter, of life, and also of stories and histories and memories. And so that's what fascinates me about it. On these 2 photographs, you can see former nitrate mines in the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is part of this research project. And I took these photos as a sort of preparatory steps to an artistic architectural work that I did there. And to me, they are very fascinating because it's the ground that captures the traces and the actions of, in this case, 100 years ago, of the nitrate extraction. And it somehow is between building and landscape and a nature culture where one cannot separate the 2 anymore. And I think in general, if we look around us, pretty much most of our environment is made up of soil in different forms, in bricks or in concrete, or made from the ground. And so that is a medium where human actions are inscribed, and also non-human actions, and as a sort of repository of what has been done, and also potential of what could be done differently in the future. It's sort of a fascination I have.
Yes, beautiful. Well, more about that later. So these are the panelists. So we're going to go a bit more deep in their specific work and expertise. And I wanted to start with the largest scale and also say one of the main, points to have also this evening about the Dutch government now finally putting soil and water steering in spatial development, which I think was already centuries the case, but we just forgot about it maybe. So what happened, Mark?
Indeed, I think last November, it was end of November, there was a letter sent to the Dutch Parliament by the Minister of Infrastructure and Water Management from the Netherlands, indicating that water and subsurface should be more guiding, more steering with the spatial planning, the spatial development of the Netherlands. And that was a result of the National Coalition Agreement 1 year earlier, where already there was this famous sentence, more or less, that water and soil should be more steering for spatial planning. Like you say, if you look, if you look back, also see it in these slides. Of course, water and soil in history always was guiding for spatial planning. If we look especially further back, people lived where it was dry. They did their agriculture where the soils were rich, etc. But over time, after industrialization, technological developments, especially urbanization, of course, the connection between the systems, the natural systems, water systems, soil systems, they got a little bit lost, especially the relation of land uses with these systems. And that resulted in the fact that now more or less we see that we reach the end of the flexibilities of these natural systems. And then we see that it results in a lot of conflicts, increasing conflicts in spatial planning. And not only spatial planning, by the way. We see also now that drinking water companies, for example, are not able of connecting all new industries to drinking water anymore. So we see on a lot of different aspects that the flexibility of these natural systems is pretty much stretched to the end. And we don't have the flexibility anymore to adjust to new situations, for example. And this is something that we see now every day, but we expect it to further increase, especially climate change is, of course, a big game changer. We see that the circumstances are becoming more difficult, and are changing. It's getting more drier, it's getting the weather is getting more extreme, etc. And it's more and more difficult for these systems to adapt to that. Another important driver, I think, is that we see that at this moment we have a lot of societal challenges in the Netherlands. We have a lot of spatial transitions that we have, like 900,000 dwellings have to be built. We have the energy transition, we have a circular agriculture, that is our ambition. So we have a lot of things that we want to do in our space, in our environment. And a lot of investments, economic investments, are going to be done in our urban environment, in our environment. So we are now at this moment where all these investments are going to be made, and we can do them in a right way and in a wrong way, of course. So this moment is very important that we do it in a proper way, and that we don't get that we don't regret the choices that we make now in our spatial planning in a few years from now. And that's the basic starting point for the Dutch national government to say now, okay, we want to change. We want to make these natural systems more guiding in our spatial planning. So that's in very short the background of why there is now this new direction in policy.
So you're also working on Deltares is then of course invited to help, right, the government to do this. So how can you do this? What are the sort of advices that they need to be able to do this?
Yeah, we see now on very well. Not only knowledge institutes, but also educational institutions, commercial parties and governments, all kinds of organizations are now trying to materialize this new policy. In this letter, which was sent to Parliament, there are 33 very concrete choices, they are called, sort of directives are mentioned. For example, to make a specific reservation of 10 to 15% area in the deepest polders in the Netherlands for water collection to prevent flooding or water disturbances in the future, or other very clear directions that the government wants to take. And we now see that we are very much looking and trying with all these different organizations on provincial level, on decentral levels, on okay, how can we bring this into practice? And on one hand, it's I think about more the planning side of it. What locations do we choose for different kind of functions? And from the perspective of water and subsurface, which are the most logical ones for agriculture or houses, etc. And the second question is more about the design part of it, I think. If we have like a specific development, how can we do it in such a way that it minimizes impact on water and subsurface and also strengthens these systems? So these are the kind of things that, that we are doing as a knowledge institute at the moment and that we try to develop knowledge on. But that we see a lot of different parties well, taking part into this exercise, this movement, how you want to call it.
Yes, we now have the slides of the Dutch layers approach, which is, of course, nothing new. And all these things are, I mean, it started with McHark, I think, in Pennsylvania with the layer cake model, where it was really about, prioritizing the natural systems before the human systems and being able to study them well. And then the right image is the report of waterbasis of Deltares and Boslabbers and Sweco, so from 2 years ago. So so these ways of thinking are not new, but what is really changing and what is the difference between the left image layers approach and the right layers approach?
Yeah, I think if you look at these two images, you see on the left side the image that is very familiar to probably most of us, the layer approach, and the one on the right. I think in the one on the left, unintentionally it was drawn not in the most correctly manner. The idea behind it, of course, is that the subsurface, it's like the lowest level, that's guiding for the networks and the occupational level on top. But if you see how it is drawn, you don't see that this subsurface is really steering the developments in these networks and these occupation layers above. And on the right one, which is, like you mentioned, from the essay Op Waterbasis, we have tried to visualize that to highlight the essence of water en bodem sturend, water and soil guidance for spatial planning, in a more visual understanding way, where you see that really this lowest level, the subsurface, is really guiding these networks and land uses above. And like you mentioned, it's nothing new. You already mentioned it's like basically it's very old, of course. In the past, it was only water and subsurface that guided our developments. But also in the recent past, I think like the last 30, 40 years, in the 80s and the 90s, there were different policies in the Netherlands which already stated like function follows water level, for example. So we already had these ideas, but somehow they did not really materialize, they did not really become into main practice. But I think that is the main difference with this moment, that we have a higher momentum at this moment, is that, well, first of all, like I mentioned, climate change is a big game changer in this one. And also that we have these, all these things, these assignments and these transitions that we have to do in our environment in the coming years, and we have a lot of money that we have to spend, and that we have to spend wisely, so we don't get a regret about these investments in 10, 20 years, that we build our houses on the wrong places, and that we have to fix all these things later on.
Yeah. Very clear. Thank you very much. We also passed by some good examples, I think, for you also, if you're interested in how this works out to move along. I would like to move to the second part of the second, driver of this evening, or initiative. Because I think in the story of Mark, you also can see that soil, that there are different different dimensions of soil that you can problematize. So it can be about the quality, is it polluted, or is it salty, is it fertile, etc. It can be about the quantity. Do we have enough sand? Because soil, we are still raising our cities with sand. The sand comes from the sea. The sand is that. The sand is salty. I mean, it's really, the moving around of sand is also a big issue, because sand is not infinitive. And then there's the performance of the soil. And I think this is also quite important that you stipulated, that we need soil to buffer water, to cool cities, to well, to grow green and be happy and have air. So it is quite crucial that the soil performance quite well. And I think this really nicely bridges to the work of Martina. Next slide. The title of your work is Soils for Transition Towards an Urbanism of Living Soil. So you heard this story of Mark. How do you see this as a potential?
Yeah, so this, for us, the potential in the project that we decided to show today, so the project around the territory of Greater Geneva, so this territory that you can see in this map, a transboundary territory. We tried to build and design a territorial project that could be built around the idea of soil as a sort of structural element that could transform and adjust and give a new direction to the project. And in this case, so today we have a little bit, not much time, but I wanted to show you an exercise that we did around urban soil, so especially urban soil, and its quantity and its hidden dimension. So it's a soil that is generally overlooked. Here you can see all the different villages. We call this map Metropolis of Villages. So you can see the extension of this urbanization. And if you go in the next slide, the idea was to observe, and here we have just the canton of Geneva, a territory that is generally understood as agricultural. At the moment of the project, there is the pedologists were working on the climate plan, and they were looking at agricultural soils as soils that could really help and could be really understood as an agent for climate. And what we tried to do with them, and we tried to sort of let emerge, was the relevance of urban soils. That was something that was, until then, quite underlooked. So what you can see on the map on the right, then is sort of split up on the left, are the three milieux, so the agricultural milieu, the urban, and the natural. So what came out is that a territory that was considered mostly agricultural actually had an amount of urban soil that was comparable to the agricultural soil. So when we began the discussion with the pedologists, they were saying urban soil is not so relevant because it has a reduced dimension. But then when we really went to understand in detail the impact of this urban soil, we found out a sort of hidden figure that actually have driven us towards the necessity of imagining some strategies for these urban soils that are often sealed or lawns surfaces that could actually play a significant role together with agricultural soil. So it's a sort of new agent that came out of the picture just through sort of a description of the space. So maybe if you go to the next slide, this is just a zoom that shows you in yellow the impact of the urban soil. So what seemed to be very small sort of villages in an agricultural land, here we are quite far from the Geneva center, actually they had transformed in time in a radical way large quantities of soils, mostly in lawns or parking lots or space for the car, that actually today forms a surface that is comparable to the agricultural one. So something new came out, and for the project actually was a sort of interesting element to build upon a different project, able to put soil at the center of the strategy. So if you go to the next slide, yeah, so the idea is to, and of course here we spoke about quantity, but then of course the other side of the discourse is quality. So then the challenge is to consider soil not as an object, but as a subject. So we started to let soil ask and interact, ask questions and interact and become an actor in the project. And we started to understand each part of the territory. This is a model that we did also with the students for its specificity in relation to topography, but also, of course, to soil, and how each different part could play a different role in relation to its specific soil quality and quantity. And so we tried to put it back in the picture because, of course, as you said before, urban soil normally is white in maps. And so this was the challenge, to give back a sort of color and a role to urban soil in the project. So this is what we tried to do for this project. That was a sort of way of looking to the future, because it was vision. We had to build a vision for the future of Greater Geneva. So it was a project of transition. So, and in this frame, we considered that soil had a role to play.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful example of also with, well, more, say, designerly observation. I guess that designing is also observing and make another interpretation, and also contextualization of your reading, which is different than you would be like a GISer mapping land use, basically, yeah, because that's what it is. I think I heard Wouter Veldhuis, he's our state advisor, landscape architecture, and he said, yeah, in our society we value land use, but not the land itself. And if you would really value land, then you can also maybe change the use because it's not fitting anymore. Is this, did these analyses also lead to this kind of strategy?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is structural, in the sense that for us, description was fundamental and structural. And that's why when you ask me about my fascination on soil, I chose a sort of photographer, because he helps us to sort of give a different, change our gaze on soil. And that's what we try to do through description, fine description of a territory that was commonly and read and understood as sort of agricultural, but then it showed something different through a fine and sort of free understanding of its structure, through, of course, going through it by foot, but also trying to build new representations of it that try to go beyond sort of stabilized and well-known representation that is false in a way.
But you also, because in the paper you published in Doise, you also have, say, sort of paradigm change kind of concepts for it, like urban soil, or also to think about not the project of the ground or the project of the soil. What's the importance also for these kind of terms, you think?
Yeah, so our thoughts, our thinking was that actually this new gaze on the soil, and then we coined this urban soil because we thought that a new attitude towards agricultural soil that has to be understood not only for its capacity to produce food, but also to stock carbon or to infiltrate water and other functions. So on one side you have a new look on agricultural soil, and on the other you have this new element that is urban soil that can play a huge role, an important role in the project for transition in relation to, of course, water infiltration, stock of carbon, biodiversity, sort of stock, etc. So the two together, a new look on agricultural and an urban soil with a new role, could, for us, play a role in this sort of paradigm shift, able to build a different kind of project that tried to give to soil a new structural role.
Is this your last slide? I don't know,
Yeah.
actually. Yes, it is. Yeah. This is a super nice bridge also to USA and the municipality of Midden-Delfland, because this is also exactly the case, I think, in this municipality. We drew here the lines of the municipality. It's a bit, this beamer is not super nice. So on the top you see Delft and the bottom is Rotterdam, so you can see that the municipality has 3 villages, and further it's a lot of farmland, right, Jose?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. And the use of the farmland is also changing. In former days, we wanted to keep it open by putting a cow in the meadow, wheat. Yeah. And because of the problems of water collecting, it's not possible. It appears not to be possible like we thought it could be. And now we're trying to keep it green by birds, meadow birds.
I don't know birds in English either, so.
No. It's weidevogels.
Weidevogels.
Meadow birds, yes. And now we are trying to save the meadow birds in the country, and that's a very important way to keep the landscape open and green, and that's for us is very important. And
because what's the relation between the farmers and the citizens being squeezed between these cities?
Yes.
How does it work?
Well, at the moment there are 2 kinds of farmers. One are from very big amounts of cows, put them in a stall, and using the land only to let grow grass, and they are not interested in the worth of the open landscape. And the other farmers, which are growing. That's the biological farmers. And here you see one of the first biological farmers, Arie van den Berg. This is a very important man in our surroundings, because he is very busy in thinking of how could I do my farming and contributing to the landscape and keep it open, and in a way that it is also for the village, the towns around. They have to use it also, because for the towns around it's also a very important thing to have a place like this.
Yes, I met Adi. He is very impressive, I must say, really, because he also explained that already 30 years ago his family found out that the groundwater that you control with the ditches, that they needed an extra ditch in the middle of the land to control it better. But that also means that you cannot work on it in an industrial way anymore. So they're not competing anymore. And I find it very interesting that what I read from your paper, indeed, it's not one thing anymore. So they are also talking about farmers to become blue farmers, so that they also become water managers and help in that sense. And
for the government, for us, it's very important that we help those farmers by paying them for doing these things. If they made an extra ditch for the water, they have less land for the cows, or and they cannot use enough money, so we have to pay them for making the ditch to help the country to keep it like it ought to be. Also for the meadow birds, there's a very special way that you can keep them in the country, but that's also very expensive, so we have to give them money to do that, to stimulate that they will do that. And fortunately, in Midden-Delfland, the number of biological farmers is growing. More and more younger farmers understand that this is the way to keep the country like it is, and they can make a living if they do it very nadenkend, totally.
Sensible.
Sensible,
Well,
yeah. If they think about it, then they can do it. But we have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And we also try to make the products that they make, that you can buy them, sell them, and people in the towns just close by. So that they buy regionale products.
Regional products.
Regional products, yeah, like that.
I put up the image of last week, 2 weeks ago, because it was very interesting how you as a municipality also try with your citizens debate these kind of things. So you organized this evening where you have, we presented a plan for their region in 100 years, which I learned that it was way too far out for the people. They were telling me, Fransje, 100 years. I mean, yeah. So, not interested. So I learned that if you make a plan for over 100 years, it's very good, but you have to translate it back and show the people what does it mean tomorrow, right? So that was very good. But why do you organize these evenings, and what does it do?
Well, I think it's very important that we have the support of the people. If you don't have the support of the inhabitants, you will never reach anything. It's politic. Now, yesterday, the Boerenburger, the BBB, it's very dangerous for us because they have only one real issue, and that's not the issue that's good for the nature. And many people run around, and we have to explain, and we have to take the possibilities of to explain to everybody what's happening and why it's so important that we do what we do. And in Midden-Delfland, water is at the moment is a very difficult issue. We have too much water and then it floods, and otherwise it's too dry. And het Hoogheemraadschap has a very important role to do this, but people say, why should we do that? Stop, put a road on it, and don't do so difficult. So you have to explain why, and that's why we do these evenings. We organize that, and every people is invited, and we ask some experts to give their point of view and explain what's the problem, and that's really helpful.
Yeah. So. It was super nice. I think this topic is very much to the heart of Deborah, and about this relationship between the citizens and the other species, the modern species, right?
The multi-species, the multi-species whole.
So you expanded living urbanism to species urbanism. Can you explain that?
Yes, multi-species urbanism. But shall I show you these 3 slides, and I'll speak about the multi-species urbanism. This is a project which is happening now in real life, in a real space in Amsterdam Zuidoost, southeast of Amsterdam, in a 56-hectare area of public space, urban public space. So in this picture, you see the flats and the Metro 53 as if it were behind all of the green and the soil that you can't see, which is as it should be. And in the next slide, you can see the meadow landscape. Actually, you're looking in this picture at a lawn right before, in April, when it starts to get mown. 22 times rain or shine by design. That's the mowing regime for urban greens. And before that, as you can see, there is nectar, nectar, nectar. There is habitat. And suddenly, it gets mown 22 times rain or shine by design to turn into a turf grass landscape. In the next slide, the work picture, we're going to see a schematic. This is a very simple schematic. And in this project that Urbania Hoeve is working on with Amsterdam Zuidoost, we are uniting through this 56 hectares through the K district, the district where all the streets start with a K, the peri-urban ecological framework with a city park further in, the Nelson Mandela Park, that goes right through the public space of the Ka district, and it unites them ecologically, also in terms of biodiversity, through a food forest. So what you're looking at here is the mowing directive, which I'll explain, of the Amsterdam Zuidoost, Amsterdam Southeast Food Forest Project. Now, in this project, we do produce food for humans, but we also produce food, nectar, multi-season, and habitat for more than humans, because decreasingly there is space for the multi-species in the peri-urban and rural landscape, and that is also in terms of soils, not just meadowlands. And we believe as Urbaniahuve that actually the public space is where we need to host extremely high levels of biodiversity. Actually, they are more biodiverse as it is, and still we're having decrease in biodiversity. And our aim with this project, aside from ticking that little box of food justice, we also like climate crisis mitigation and ecological justice through this mowing regime. So there are citizen, say, orchards in this highly densely built public space, greens, urban greens, in a few places, but mostly it is linked ecologically through this mowing regime. And I'll explain just really quickly what this is. So in this first top row, you see this green stripe, and this is just an indication to the mower, mow 1/3 of every parcel. This is a very common approach to meadowifying, like José is doing in these areas, how to turn a soil, which is a soil seed bank, filled with the seeds. It's come there by bird butts and wind, all of the seeds that have been brought there, and if they're mown 22 times, rain or shine, by design, they can't be. If you mow 1/3, in April, May, and then in the second mowing pass, June, July, you'll mow in a different direction another 1/3. And in end of September, October, you'll mow yet another 1/3. And you can see by looking at this schematic that there's parts that are always unmown, where species can escape. Most bird species nest in the soil, in the meadowland. They don't need it. They're not nesting in trees. They're nesting in meadow plants. So this is a way to rapidly increase the biodiversity. We didn't come up with this. This is called ecological or phased mowing. It's practiced all over Europe. It works very quickly. We already have orchids returning to the area. Many species, rare and threatened species, are returning to Amsterdam Zuidoost Food Forest. Come and look pretty soon. And, well, this is effective method. Oh, yes, and what about multi-species urbanism?
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, so in 2019, I started thinking about this also in the context of my PhD. What would it be if urbanism was driven by the needs of the multi-species? By the way, in us, we are also multi-species. We are mostly not us. In our gut, we are dependent upon these yeasts and bacteria. We would die rather quickly without this multi-species whole. This multi-species whole is also the same one that's in our pocket woodlands and pocket meadows in the cities and outside. The more diverse it is there, the more diverse it is in us, and that is a direct indicator of health. So multi-species urbanism is saying, let's produce an urbanism that is driven by the needs of the multi-species whole, and that will give us the right ideas about what we need to be doing in space. It will give us a climate crisis mitigation, some buffering. It will give us the right water levels. It will feed us. and it will feed them.
Thank you. We'll come back to this action aspect of your work, but we're moving now to Verne, because it's also more the topic of soil quality and what humans, of course, have done to our, soil suffering from human interaction. So this is your location, I guess?
Yes, this is Liège, from the neighborhood of Brissou. And this image is really well visualizing this post-carbon landscape that we are dealing with in this design task. And yeah, I was already in the introduction talking about this sealed and unsealed, really little research compared to what I just all heard about these different landscapes. So we also mapped the open and visible earth soil landscapes in the city of Liège. And with one landscape, which is an agricultural field more in the hinterland of Liège. Yes, I think it will go somewhere in the next slides. You will see my design site that I chose.
Yeah, you're building up this image with layers of analysis. We read it like that?
Yeah. So this layering is visualizing this link between the material landscape of the city, which then consists of literally the soil, the surface, even the sky, and it links very much to the cultural structures that are also part of the city. And in the case of Liège, you can see that the soil provided the economy and the industry in Liège to grow, and this growing industry also brought along different cultural and religious structures into the city. So this shows that there is an important link to be made between this material landscape and then the social landscape. So in my design project, which is currently halfway, hopefully. So I'm in the middle of the process of this.
You passed your P2, right? So then you're halfway. Yeah.
So in my design project, I chose one unsealed landscape, which was the big site you just saw. It's an agricultural landscape, actually. I also just learned more about my site and the potential about this agricultural soil. In my design, I want to take this totality of the landscape, so all these layers in material form from soil, surface, sky. So I want to integrate this building in this whole landscape, but also connect it to the cultural structures to the landscape. That's the theme.
And what are we looking at in this slide?
Yeah, we're looking here at...
Is this a section or a plan or a...
It is a section of a potential ceremonial building. So the program I proposed is a religion-independent gathering place, either ceremonial or spontaneous. And this program is not organized by religion, but by the activities they have in common. So talking about three main activities: mourning, resting, and celebrating. And these activities, which are common, and then this ground, which is common, are then relating all the different religions of Bressou, Liège, into this building.
More closeness to Mother Earth and nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. What is difficult for you as getting into this topic? What are questions that you have that you...
Yeah, it is actually difficult to find a way to really connect to soil, because in previous photo of Walter and Maria, he's really literally touching the ground, and he's in his art he's also connecting with the surface or the soil by making this drawing. So these are quite literal ways by touching and drawing, but then to translate it into this building and into the use of a building and a landscape, I find it actually quite difficult to find a way there.
Did you find good examples, or is it still
there
to be discovered?
Yeah, it's 50-50. It's to be discovered.
Yeah.
But also, I already found good references. But it's mostly in an art or an exhibition format to make a statement or an impact, instead of the use of a real practical building. So that's what I hope to find soon.
Super nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for now. I see that the time is going quite fast, faster than I thought. So I'm going to Michael now, which is in the same kind of field. I hear stained and storage studies at the resource extraction as a mythological landscape, and the interaction with humans and the soil is central. So can you share something about what lines of research you're conducting within this project?
Yeah, could you go back one? I think there was this one exactly. It's my sort of an initiatory experience with soil, because my approach is a very subjective and situated one. So I usually don't work with a big scale and large maps from above, but I try to get into the thick of these places and landscapes. And in this case, I was interested in going to the origin of our oil-based world. And so this is the oldest industrial oil field in the world, in Baku in Azerbaijan. And what I did is something very banal, basically very archaic, going there, walking on this sticky ground. This is crude oil that you see on the image. That's the spillage of 150 years of oil extraction. And so for me, it was important to go there, to touch it, to smell it, to see it, and also to interact with it. And in this case, that work is called oil field paintings, and it's sort of a play with oil painting, just using crude oil as the material. And I've realized that it's not so easy to deal with it. It's very sticky, and so this is sort of a situated painting performance that I did with its soil on this oldest oil field in the world. And to the lower right, you see the security service that came. So there was also something that was to be expected, basically.
What were you doing, they were thinking? Huh?
Yeah, and there are a lot of things that are forbidden there, and you shouldn't go to these places, and it's forbidden to take photographs, and painting for a whole day is something that... So somebody called them, and which became an interesting part of the project, because it's also about the power topography and the power relations that the soil is always enmeshed in. And in this case, it's a very important one, because it's the birth ground of oil extraction. And so I was questioned for a long time, was also surveyed through my phone for the years to come, until I found out that my emails are being read by the authorities. And so that's something that is also all connected to soil. And so in this regard, this for me was sort of a starting point with that. And also one of the predecessors of the research project that I'm doing here. And you mentioned it's called Stained and Storied. So that again is the fascination with the material, with the matter, but also with the stories and the histories and the the social relations and also the power, political ideologies and all that that the soil or the resource is enmeshed in. Yeah. And this image, for example, is one. It's in this case it's called mine paintings, and it's pretty related to the oil field paintings. So again, another site of extraction. In this case, the nitrate mines in the Atacama Desert in Chile, where I was digging in the soil in different locations of the mine. The soil was very different in each place, even within a couple of square meters, different colors, and heavily polluted soil also. And it's impossible to discern what is natural or what is the result of the mining. And I don't remember exactly which slides but I think the next one might be this one. Exactly, is a sort of using the soil now to create temporary spaces. So this is the nitrate, the salpeter, which was used as a fertilizer until it was artificially produced already in the beginning of the 20th century, and that was the end of the mining boom nitrate mining boom in Chile, and it was used for explosives also in the First World War. And so this intervention plays with the material itself. So this is an explosive mixture that me and a friend and colleague of mine did in the former mines, in a sort of landscape drawing into the landscape with the resource itself that had been extracted, and then igniting it into a sort of flash-like explosion to get a new perspective onto these sites. It's a sort of temporary theater stages almost. And so the landscape starts to glow and to explode, basically, and puts all these traces of extraction into a new perspective. And then we continued with photogrammetry in this case to map these natural cultural landscapes. And I find it very fascinating. Like, there are buildings, architecture made out of the ground, and it sort of dissolves into the ground, and it's formed out of the ground. So like the soil and something that comes on top of it, how we usually think about cities very often, which of course is a very simplified way of thinking about it here, is obviously not possible. So the landscape and architecture and the traces and the memories and pieces of everyday objects that had been left and the ground all forms one sort of continuum.
Is there, because you show very different locations with very different spatial impact, and you're very interested in the cultural aspect, is there a sort of common denominator you're looking for, or are you exploring, say, impacts or differences, or what are you looking for?
Yeah, basically I'm always looking for the mix of the material condition of a site and the immaterial histories and stories that go into it. And that also comes from a fascination with spirits and ghosts and phantoms. Because I used to live in Papua New Guinea for a long time and direct the architecture program there at the university. And the spirit houses of Papua New Guinea is something that stayed with me, turned into my PhD project, and is something that that became very, very important for me. And there, the idea is also to sort of this architecture that is formed out of the natural material of the landscape, and also vanishes after 15 to 20 years, and a settlement cannot be 10 years later. Everything has been reappropriated by nature, and but the idea of the more than human, also fictional agents and actors, but that are very real in so far as they have a very real impact on what we do. And this might be monsters and spirits, but it might also be ideologies and social cultural narratives like neoliberalism in that sense. So I'm not so much interested in esoteric reading of it, but in a very real reading of it.
Because is the spiritual, is that nature for you?
Spiritual? Is
it nature?
Yeah, what nature is has become such a difficult question, but I think that like it forms a very important part of the environment, or of our understanding and dealing with the environment. Beliefs also that motivate actions. And
especially the understanding, because I learned from Harari's book that people, before the agricultural revolution, people actually were keeping more knowledge in their heads than we are now. They knew much more than we know now, because they knew every little detail on how ants behaved, felt, ate, moved, and with this all aspects of nature. Super interesting. Are we at the end of your slides?
That's the last one. Yeah, that's an architectural project that came out of the work in the mines, and it's in progress, and it's called A Room for Storytellers, which again tries to make the link between the physical condition of the landscape and the stories that are being told. And in this case, it's I worked with local mythologists and also indigenous activists that try to tell counter stories to the mining ideologies, because of course those are the most well-known, that are supported by the state and the government. So it's about the ideologies of progress and extraction as a sort of a glorified act. But the impact, especially in the Atacama Desert, is enormous and horrible. Also in relation to water. Lithium mining, for example, that has become so important for the electromobility, needs an incredible amount of water in the driest place in the world. And so there are a lot of whole livelihoods are in danger of becoming extinct, and the civilization there of running out of water because the mines use so much. And so there are so many different stories to be told, and this project is an attempt to create a room for storytellers. And in this case, I don't know if that's visible, in the section here, that it uses the soil basically and the pieces, the leftovers of the mines as a sort of structure, and just ties them together with a roof that provides protection against the desert sun. And in this case also makes readable the different stages of soil, from a building that existed already to just pieces of gravel and sand. So as a sort of the gestures of mining that are still visible.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm looking at the room here for people who would like to know more of these 6 fascinating panelists showing a lot of different techniques, stories, perspectives. They're all smiling for the people at home who don't see them, but they are very reluctant to ask any question. Say especially this use of the earth, and this is a question to all of you, because the mining is quite a good example that, the way that we mine and the way you use then the territory is that it is, it's destroyed so much, and it also is so feeding into this global level. So it's a global commodity, but this local impact is devastating, and basically there's no future, if there is any future, after this mining. It's super difficult to really heal these areas again. So also maybe in this healing of soil and water systems, how do you see this if you also hear each other's stories? Is this something that, is this going anywhere? Are you optimistic? Martina?
Well, optimistic is a big word, but why not? I was interested in knowing more about these moments of discussion with the inhabitants that were described, and the position of farmers, because we understand now that farmers have a role as sort of stewards of soil, and that agricultural soil, but also urban, but agricultural soil has a role, big role to play. And this quotients, how do you say, the fact that they understand that they have a big role to play, it's coming more and more to the fore. And so the political sort of level is trying to find ways to evaluate this, so to give incentives or other, but I'm always trying to understand if actually what is the position of the farmers in relation to this, because for them it's a strong move to change, sometimes radically, the way they have to treat their fields, the way they have to grow their crops. So it's a sort of double move. On one side, politicians have to find ways of sustaining this movement, but on the other side, we need sort of actors that move forward in a new direction. But I was curious to know from you, starting from these gatherings, what is the feeling that you have? What is their feeling of these people that are sort of actors on the first row, no? Having a very fundamental role in this sort of transition towards a different era and a different territory, able to act also through agriculture. So what is their feeling? Are they reluctant in relation to changing their ways of cultivating and practicing? And how do they feel in relation to this?
Well, for the farmers, it is a very difficult position, because they have to feed their family, they have to earn the money, and the big tech Campina and this the agriculture groups are paying for the wrong things, and for a farmer, it's very difficult to say, okay, we'll do it in our way, because then they lost a lot of money, and that makes it very difficult. And for the government, it's absolutely necessary that we help them. But yeah, we are hanging on the voters. So if the voters say, no, we don't want you to do this, then it's over, because the money is only to spend if the voters are okay. What happens now is a very difficult situation, because the het Rijk,
national
the
government,
national government understands and tries to do the right things, but it's always difficult, because the agriculture, what say now? The Campina's.
So this is the big milk company, Campina.
Yeah, like that. They are spoiling all our good trials, and it's difficult, because they have lots of money and can easily influence the farmers, and for them it's very difficult. So the easiest way is to say, okay, give me the money and we'll do what you want, well, because you know what we need. But the omslag, the turnaround is very difficult to make for the farmers. Also because they are, for years and years, they found it normal to do their farming in the old way, which is not the right way, as we know now. But
yes, thank you. We have 2 more minutes, Javier just told me. So I'd like to have a sort of last, it goes really fast. A last response, maybe. Deborah, you are also quite passionate about this topic, right? Of new services of soil to accommodate other societal interests.
Yes. Well, multi-species urbanism, for example, would see to a soil, would facilitate a soil that's taking up these new roles or these other roles. Actually, it's the most natural role of a soil, to absorb water, not to drain water, to absorb water, to hold it over long periods of time, to keep urban landscapes, which are especially now notoriously dry, creating all kinds of health problems in cities with dust and drought, and creating even infrastructural problems, because with drought comes flooding. Whole soils designed for drainage in this time, when a living soil is a soil that is holding water and holding a huge amount of life. If you consider how much, if you try to even, it's almost difficult to quantify how much it can hold if you just serve the living part of the living soil. In those chromatograms, even in a polluted soil, even in a highly contaminated soil, if there is soil life, and you can support the soil life because there's also some moisture, you can piggyback, and make a soil behave a lot differently. And there are wonderful examples all over the world where this has happened. Also in desert regions where there's, I don't know if that Jordan, for example, I'm sure it's not as dry as the Atacama Desert, but there are areas without rainfall where soils are being regenerated through plants and phytoremediation, through mycoremediation, and the proper placement, also known as spatial design, of plantings and serving these so that they can create dew traps, which become rain traps, which can support trees. Trees, a lot of trees together make rain. So there are examples, small scale, upon which we can piggyback. I would be optimistic.
Okay. May I say something? That's something in which a political part can help, because now we are trying in the towns, there are too much stones.
Yeah,
and we try to convince people, and maybe we are going to say that they have to put the stones away in the gardens so that there is more soil, so that we can collect water. We try to stop them from having the water from the roof that's going down via the pipes, just in the ground. We say, cut it off, put it and let it flow in the ground. So that's what the political awareness is coming, and they are trying to do that. So therefore you can be a little bit optimistic.
Yes.
But the people has to do it. And many people say, oh no, it's too difficult. It's very easy to have only stones, and it's clean and no animals, but they have to learn that it's not the right way. And
they posted, we have the national championship of flipping tiles, so they put it as a challenge. We are out of time. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm also surprised. I really want to thank you. I think we've shown how a lot of examples, how thinking about soil can be steering in many, many ways, culturally, socially, spatially, specially. So I really want to thank you for these perspectives, and I think it's just the start of really making this change, and I am quite positive actually. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for sharing the knowledge. I'm really happy that the last words were coming from a politician. I think it's really, that's one of the things that we're trying to do at the BK Talks, is try to bridge all we know here, which I think we all share, but apparently after what we saw yesterday, it's not passing on the citizenship. Yeah. So thank you very much to a representative of the citizenship to be here. Just a closing element, is just one announcement. Next March 31st, we open the exhibition BK Africa, a laboratory of the future, with a question mark. This is what we are busy with right now. We did an open call last month, and we received about 50 submissions from work, which is being realized now at the Faculty of Architecture. And it's just the idea of, comes because we were trying to respond to Leslie Locos, the curatorial statement for the Venice Biennale. In her curatorial statement, this is just 3 lines. She says, there is one place in which all these questions of equity, resources, race, hope, and fear converge and coalesce: Africa. At an anthropological level, we are all African, and what happens in Africa happens to us all. So that was really for us a challenge, and we are trying to respond to such a statement, trying to, in a way, revise a little bit what the relationship between the faculty and Africa has been or is being in the current time. So you are all very welcome to join us on the Friday, March 31st for drinks at the Auxerre. See you very soon, and tot de volgende keer. Bye.